Good morning, everyone. I was going to say, clearly Rosa's been to an event I've hosted before. Good morning, everyone. All right, I can sort of feel it. One more time. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Oh, awesome. That warms my heart. A warm welcome to everyone this morning and to everyone tuning in virtually. It's a great pleasure to have you here today for our 2022 FDI Forum. My name's Alexander Pasternak-Jackson. I'm the CEO of Amcham Finland, and today is a day that the Amcham team and I have been looking forward to for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, decision makers, friends, welcome to Amcham's annual FDI Forum. So let's make sure that the coffee's kicked in and we're on the same page. What does FDI stand for? Oh yes, Casper's paying attention. Okay, foreign direct investment. We're going to try that again. I know you didn't think you were all going to work this morning. You thought you were going to in here and absorb and listen, but you know what FDI is about? It's about engagement. So, what does FDI stand for? All right, excellent. And we served coffee this morning for exactly that reason. Amcham Finland, we're the voice of international business in Finland. We're an independent, non-profit, corporate membership-based organization. Say that 5 times fast. We look after the long-term interests of international companies invested here and committed to Finland. We have companies headquartered in 17 different countries, and from industries that run the gamut, from defense to technology, life science, to forestry. And all in all, we have 20 different industries, and about half our membership are foreign investors who have chosen to make their Finland home. And what these companies have in common is their commitment to Finland and to ensuring that Finland is an attractive place to do business. After all, that's why we're all here. So, what does foreign direct investment bring to Finland? Jobs, yes. Oh, you guys have played this game before. Jobs, capital, knowledge exchange, innovation, talent, tax revenue, and more. And FDI is the key to sustaining economic well-being in this country. And that's really what we believe. That's what the Amcham team wakes up for every day. And that's what many of the country managers in this room know. And I suspect if you're in this room, you already know that as well. Now, who brings us FDI? Don't worry, we're not in class. So those international investors I mentioned, those what we often call foreign investors, they bring us FDI. They bring us that capital, those jobs, that innovation. But you know, they aren't just foreign investors. They are Finnish companies of global origin. They are Oy's who have made their home here in Finland. And FDI investment decisions can take 5 to 7 years to come to fruition, and sometimes longer. And so that's why Amcham is committed to an ongoing dialogue and working with the public sector and the government to ensure that we're globally competitive in attracting investment, talent, and driving innovation. Some of the wins Amcham Finland has had in the past throughout the years is getting FDI into the government program, ensuring that the public ecosystem has FDI aftercare on its agenda, and that more and more decision makers are listening to the voice of international business in Finland to ensure that Finland thrives. And those voices are companies like Bayer, Kyndryl, Vattenfall, and Borenius, who are our partners for this event. These companies represent excellence in life science, in technology, in green energy, and in service. Thank you all for working so closely with us to pull this event together and for working closely with us on Finland's future. I think everyone in this room can acknowledge and knows that we are living in uncertain times. With a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape, major war in Europe, supply chain issues, multi-decade inflation, a looming energy crisis, and the world emerging from a pandemic. Now is the time to come together around something that we can all be certain of. And what we can be certain of is Finland's future attractiveness as an investment destination if we work together on it. So, our program today covers topics absolutely vital to ensuring Finland's future attractiveness. We're going to talk about talent, predictability of laws and regulation, digital infrastructure, incentives for research and development, as well as Finland's relative strengths and weaknesses. First, we'll be hearing from Aki Kangasharju, the CEO of Etla, with a look ahead to 2023, Finland's geopolitical and economic landscape for business. Then I'll be inviting Kasper Hurler, who's the managing partner at Borenius, to talk about unlocking investments with environmental permits. And then we'll move into our FDI Vision panel discussion that is hosted and moderated by the chair of Amcham's board of directors and the managing partner of August Associates, Tomi Ere. And Tomi will introduce our panelists. Now, before I introduce our first speaker, I also want to welcome all of our new members who are here today, as well as new faces from our membership. The team and I were going over the attendance list for today, and for those of you tuning in at home. And there are brand new country managers there, and members for whom this is their first event, members for whom this is their first live event, and decision makers that are at an Amcham event for the very first time. So I really want to say from the bottom of my heart, warmly, warmly welcome. Amcham Finland at its heart is an international and English-speaking business community. At our events, we always want you reconnecting with existing relationships and forging new ones. So before I welcome Aki on stage, and those of you who've been with us for our Luminary series know I like to do this. Before I welcome Aki on stage, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to turn around in your chair and introduce yourself to someone you haven't met or don't really know very well. Pull out those phones, get those QR LinkedIn codes, and go. 3, 2, 1, go. And for those of you tuning in at home, this is an excellent opportunity for you to engage on social media with us. Our hashtags are FDI Vision, and hashtag FinFDI. All right. You know, let's see if I can get control over the room again. All right, you know I hate cutting the buzzing sound of conversation. But we do have a jam-packed program today. I'm going to ask who here in the room, by a show of hands, has reconnected with someone they've already met before? Oh, yes, that's what community is about, is ongoing relationships. And who here has this morning met someone new that they haven't known before? Hey! The entire room's hands went up. That is exactly what the Amcham community is all about. We want you building new relationships in the business community and within the public sector, as well as reconnecting so that we can build a sense of our Amcham network. Okay, so one other thing. I know you are all engaged, you're awake, that coffee's kicked in. We are going to have room for some questions for each of the speakers, and there will be questions for the panelists as well. The number one feedback we got last year from the launch of our FDI Vision was please more times for questions, which I think is just, you know, superb in a Finnish context, but in any context really as well. So keep that thinking going. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. We are among friends. Your opinions, your questions are really a valuable addition because that's what we want is an ongoing dialogue, a conversation. So keep that in mind. So without further ado, I now want to warmly welcome to the stage Aki Kangasharju. He's the managing director at the Etla Research Institute, and before joining Etla, he was the chief economist at the Nordea Bank and headed the VATT Institute for Economic Research. Aki is widely published and a frequent published speaker at international universities. He's had official posts as board members at the Innovation Fund Tekes and the University of Jyväskylä. He's currently a docent in economics at the University of Jyväskylä as well. Aki, a warm welcome.
any alarming level so far. So we still have time to respond in sort of orderly manner. But what we need to do is we need to take inflation into account. Sorry about the title there. But the headline inflation is way too high. And that is something we need to deal with. But the difference between blue and red line is the effect of the war. But if that would be the only sort of problem here, that would be a very easy thing, or fairly easy thing, because it would be a very temporary thing. We would need to hike rates somewhat, but not that much, and not that for that long time and so forth. But since the blue lines are up as well, so blue lines are the inflation rates excluding energy and non-processed foods, this problem has become more severe, more long-lasting, even to the extent that even our Prime Minister says that we shouldn't hike rates because it turns our economy into recession and we should do something else. And so even politicians have gone crazy at this point. But economy hasn't. So what happens here? Like a year ago, we thought that the only problem here, at least in the Eurozone, would be the sort of upward trend of the red and green lines. And then in that case, we would have only two options or two scenarios. We might get sort of short landing where the central banks would be able to hike rate just enough, just the correct amount, without pushing economy to a recession. Or then we had another sort of scenario where central banks hiked too much because they were late, especially in the US they were late. So we had two options there, either soft landing or back to the secular stagnation and zero rate world. But now that the inflation has become more sort of long-lasting, we didn't only get sort of a rebound from the corona, we also have this war, we have very high energy prices, we've had problems in the international value chains, Chinese ports were locked down for a quite long periods of time, and so forth and so forth. All these things have made inflation more long-lasting. And a longer inflation is, more we need to hike rates to bring that inflation down. So now we actually have four options here. On top of these two, we still may end up in a soft landing scenario and a sort of short sort of crisis, but we also may end up in a longer-term crisis where we have two options there. Number C, or option C, is that we end up in stagflation, where we have long-term inflation, and since the globalization turns backwards, for example, we have sort of, we need to bring back the value chains and everything that may slow down economy for a longer period of time. Then we end up in a 70s type of stagflation. But then we also have in this longer term scenario, we also have a sort of possibility for something good. Even though inflation stays up, we need to invest in green transition, we need to invest in defense, we need to investment because of many things. And if investments really start kicking up, we made up in a situation where we have both high inflation and high growth. And which one is the world we are going to end up? I don't know. But I have a few sort of, if I have time, and you will tell me what is how I'm doing here, I'll show you a few graphs to back up all these four scenarios. First is the soft landing scenario, which can still happen. And if central banks don't hike too much, we get some backing from the international markets. For example, commodity prices are declining already. That eases inflation, and that already is happening in the US. The headline inflation came down last month. And the pressure in the global value chains has eased. Baltic Dry Index has come down, which means that international sort of value chain pressure is easing and prices are coming down, which means that inflation might actually come down pretty quickly. And when we reach the end of February, when there's one full year from the start of the war, we sort of, by definition, we will see lower inflation rates because inflation is measured relative to the year before. So because the base effect comes up, inflation comes down, and we made up in a fairly good point here. Number three, option 2, or B, what is this? Now that central banks have been late, they need to hike, and they are now hiking sort of quite rapidly and aggressively, and that is happening in the US to the extent that they will hike up to 5% or something. But this may not only apply to US, because the proportion of goods that are becoming more expensive than 4% by year in your area is the same as in the US. So inflation is very broad in euro area as well. At least the OECD thinks that that is the reason why euro area needs to, or ECB needs to hike rates almost as much as the Fed needs to do. And that might, bring us recession, and a bad one. So B is potential as well. How about the stagflation thing? Stagflation means that globalization needs to turn back. We need to bring production back home where production costs are higher than in China, and then we may get more shocks. Like, for example, the gas shortage in Germany. If that happens this winter, GDP in euro area won't grow like plus 0.3 next year, but minus 1.3%. And so then we have a much more severe shock. Or, if I heard correctly this morning on radio, someone said that even 22 of the total of 55 nuclear power stations in France are under maintenance. So almost half of them. So if they can't reopen those nuclear power stations, the price of electricity increases in France dramatically. So if we get both gas shock in Germany, electricity shock in France, we are in trouble and we might end up in a stagflation. And number 4 is the high growth, high inflation story, which means that since employment now is very high, profitability is very high, the share of non-performing debt is very low, so corporate sector is doing fine. We might, they may stand well this crisis, so growth may continue, and even the sort of these professional forecasters think that we may end up in a situation where long-term inflation is much higher than the targeted 2% level. So we may also end up in a situation where we have both high growth and inflation. So if I had time, I would make a survey, but now you can think by yourselves that which is the correct answer here. For the short term, or short or medium term. But now let's turn to the longer term issues. There I only have, well, much shorter or not that many options or scenarios. But let's approach that longer term issue with these two graphs here. Finland and Sweden have applied NATO membership. We are going to join NATO very soon, and both this NATO membership and the war also, of course, has raised the question that what is the country risk in Finland? Can we invest in Finland? And one way to measure that is to measure the risk premium of our government bonds against Germany's bonds. And here we have an interesting result. From the start of the war, yield of our bonds has increased more than those in Germany, but look at Sweden. So yields have diverged from each other dramatically, which means that it's not actually NATO membership, nor actually the war that is behind this result. What I think more behind this divergence is shown on the right-hand side. Our public debt level has gone above Germany's level, but Sweden is going down. So it's the debt level that is determining more these yields than NATO membership or the war. And this is, of course, it gives us less some room for maneuver to deal with the long-term issues if we don't have room to maneuver. But what will happen? Of course, there are two sort of clear consequences of this war in the long term. One is the speeding up of the green transition, that happens for sure, and the other one is the increase in public, in defense spending. Green transition, of course, is a good thing, but it's not only a good thing. Defense spending is costly, but it's not necessarily only costly. So we have both good and bad consequences of these both developments. Since a green transition, of course, we need that, and that is great. We have a great industrial base here to deal with that transition here in Finland. But green transition needs to be dealt with at the global level and the European level. Europe is planning a new joint debt program. We may end up in a situation where Europe gets a lot of new debt, both at the country level and European level, and the government takes such a big role that it sort of sucks the air out of business sector. So we made up getting a stagnation or well-functioning European Union that becomes as important player as China and US in the future. So we have two options here. The same applies to the defense spending. It's costly, it increases our debt here, but it also may improve our productivity. It increases our R&D inputs, and those may spill over to other industries, and we may get a higher productivity because of higher defense spending. So in the long term, we also have both promising and very distressing scenarios. And now you can decide what happens in the short term and the long term. Thank you.
Please stay, Aki. Yeah. I'll join you up here. Thank you so much for that excellent overview. I would like to know, since you said you would have taken a survey, and I think this audience knows I like the interactive aspect, to give you guys a moment to think of what you guys want to ask Aki in terms of questions with these scenarios. Where do you want to pull up the slide? There we go. Okay, show of hands. Who thinks that we're going to end up in scenario A? Oh, Aki. All right, who thinks we're going to end up in scenario B? All right. Who thinks we're going to end up in scenario C? All right, a fairly healthy show of hands for C as well. And who thinks we're going to end up in scenario D? All right, fair. That was pretty evenly split on B, D, and C and D. What do you think about that, Aki?
I'm so thankful that you are so optimistic. Even option D would be possible. That's great. I'm more pessimistic.
Okay, all right. Any questions for Aki? Go right ahead. Why don't you say your name and your role and organization to get us started? Mics are necessary so the viewing audience at home can hear you as well.
My name is Antti Aumo. I'm head of Invest in Finland at Business Finland. Aki, thank you for a very interesting presentation. My understanding of general economic theory is that governments in good times should save money, and in bad times they should spend money. Looking back, Finland in the recent years, despite fairly good economic environment, has not been saving money so much. So now heading into recession, what should we do?
It's a $1,000 question, I think. Yeah, that's it. Since 2008, our living standard has increased 0%. Productivity has increased 0%, but our debt has increased 100%. So we, just as you said, we haven't been able to save in good times so that we could spend now. And that's why we are here in this position where we don't have any reserves left. Because now that central banks, they don't buy government bonds anymore, they decrease the balance sheet. So someone else needs to buy our bonds. And now, since we have higher debt than Germany, which sets the risk-free level, the premium will increase going forward. So we, on top of putting more money to defense, green transition, aging population, we need to reserve more money for interest expenditure. So we are in a trouble.
What kind of effect would, let's say, doubling the amount of FDI we get into this country have?
What effect?
Yeah.
Well, a dramatic effect. That's what we need. We need sort of different people from me. So people that believe in the future. and we need wiser.
That's what I'm doing here.
we need wiser politicians that make the sort of the real competitiveness of our sort of Finnish landscape better. Not only the cost competitiveness. We've been able to improve our cost competitiveness because we kept our wages low. We have reduced our social sort of these payroll taxes and so forth. But where we haven't been able to improve our situation is productivity that has been declining relative to the other countries. So we need more highly educated people. We need to reform our adult education system. We need more immigration. Of course, the parliamentary decision to increase the R&D expenditure, there we need to be careful so that we direct those public sort of inputs into productive use and not to spread it all over the place and everywhere. That's to start with, if we would be able to do those reforms. And of course, one of the major things is to improve the incentive system of the wage structure. There are too many people at home because it doesn't pay off to go to work. We need to reform that as well. So many things need to be done, but they are not impossible. If we want to change it, we can do it. We just need to have the political will for it.
I think that's also what the last 2-3 years has shown us, is if we want to do things, we can do them. And I think everyone in this room feels that this is something that we should do. We should be focusing on bringing in talent, increasing immigration, on making sure that companies are supported in their R&D efforts, which leads to innovation, and all the other things that you mentioned. Any other questions for Aki? Thoughts, comments? Go ahead, Kasper.
You mentioned sort of commodities, and I think you I assume you referred to oil and gas mostly. Right now, the London Metals Exchange is contemplating whether they should ban Russian minerals of being stockpiled into their warehouses, and any thoughts on what that could cause in terms of inflation if that happens?
Yeah, that would be another shock from the war, and that of course then turns these graphs back upwards. Now we are not seeing that much here of the effect of this new deal of the OPEC countries and Russia to cut back oil production. If they cut it, and if that deal holds, then we have a problem there. If the development, what you mentioned, actually happens, we have another problem. So all these things can turn things for the worse, of course.
I'm not going to let you end on that note. What can turn things for the better?
Yeah, the war ends. That is one thing. And the war actually, we don't actually need that. We need to see that the war wouldn't escalate. It would, become encapsulated there, and we would then get used to it, and businesses wouldn't be that afraid of it, and then the investments would pick up again. And of course, then if we would be able to keep the wage increases low, so that and fiscal stimulus low enough, so that we wouldn't make the inflation worse than it is, then the inflation would come down and things would cool down, and then the growth would resume.
And sorry, go ahead. Heikki, please. Cindy, why don't you bring a...
Thank you, Heikki, Malinen, Outokumpu. I'm not sure if this is a positive or a negative question, but I do have to ask you, if you look at China, potential new emperor about to be appointed here in the coming weeks. So if we look at the global economy since 2008, the global financial crisis, so it seems to me that every time China has stimulated its economy with massive amounts of liquidity, it's taken about 6 to 9 months, and then the global economy starts moving. And without China basically, pumping money into the system, the global economy does not move. Would you agree with this sort of hypothesis? And then secondly, do you think China will move and start stimulating? And when would that happen?
Yeah, that stimulus in China, for example, in 2015, that was dramatic. That also helped us in Finland to resume growth. So I'm sure that if China would do it again, to the same extent, that would, help the world economy. Maybe to the lesser extent that it has used to do, because it has become more internal. The external links are now weaker than they used to be. So the sort of the efficiency of that policy would be lower in terms of the global economy. Will China do it? They wouldn't like to do it, but I think they must come back to that issue if growth really slows down. They won't let the sort of the property bubble to burst. Growth is so important to China that they will do everything to not let that happen. So I'm sure that they will do that. But of course, we need more engines to the world economy now that China has become sort of more closed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Aki, one final thought. We have public decision makers in the room, civil servants, we have parliamentarians, we have business leaders. And after our session together, we're going to be having continued conversation. What would you like to see us talking about?
The Finnish competitiveness, the ways to increase both domestic investments and the foreign direct investments coming to Finland. That is, of course, number one, but another one is what are the sort of decisions that we need to make to contain the debt level, how to make the debt per GDP lower in the future.
All right, so containing the debt level, bringing in foreign direct investment, and improving the business environment. It's all set.
That would be great.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Heikki.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Let's get us right there. Perfect. All right. Thank you, Aki, for giving us a look ahead in 2023, and to our audience members for your active engagement. Next on our agenda is on the topic of unlocking investments through permitting with Kasper Hurler. Kasper Hurler is the managing partner of Borenius and heads the environmental and natural resources practice. He advises clients on a wide range of issues related to environmental law, assessing environmental liabilities, natural resources and infrastructure projects, as well as corporate responsibility, CSR. Kasper has also worked at the Ministry of the Environment, teaches environmental law at the University of Helsinki. He has a doctoral degree in law and has disserted on soil and groundwater contamination liability. And Kasper also sits on our policy-oriented advisory board and heads the red tape and permitting working group. So a warm welcome to you, Kasper.
Thank you, Alexandra. So now I will tell you in 10 minutes how we will make the Finnish permitting system world-leading in attracting investments without compromising the environment. I only have 10 minutes, so the more detailed proposals can be found on the Amcham webpage. I voted D because I believe in what I will be telling you next. Basically, to start up with a rhetoric question, instead of sort of taking a quite low ambition level and aiming at being less slow in permitting investments, what would happen if we would aim to be the world's best in leading new investments? Just as a thought. And then setting the ambition level. And following up on that, why couldn't an environmental licensing system be both environmentally ambitious and fast and predictable? That was kind of one of the starting points for our working group, that we believed in that we can find solutions where it's not kind of an oxymoron, where you would have sort of fast and predictable and also sort of environmentally ambitious in the same system. Just as a reminder, when we have been working with this, obviously in the Amcham context, one of the key drivers have been the FDI vision, which we put together, which is the first kind of long-term vision for bringing FDI to Finland. We did work because we felt that FDI as an abbreviation was not that well known in Finland prior to our work. But I think sort of foreign direct investments generally, and in particular in this topic, is a really good indicator, and one that we need to listen very carefully to. Because if we can't attract foreign direct investments, that will also be an indicator of us losing on the domestic investments. But the foreign investors are perhaps more prone to look at different various locations, whereas the domestic ones are more prone to have a kind of a higher threshold to go abroad. But we've seen that. We've seen billion euro investments from our national companies going to other places in Finland, in Europe. And permitting has been one of the factors, and that's been one of the driving things behind us looking at the permitting system with new glasses, with a new perspective. So basically, the idea behind the work is that it's possible to expedite investments without compromising the environment. Then the other sort of key thought behind this is that we need to fix the bottlenecks. We need to identify the bottlenecks in the whole sort of permitting maze and fix those. And that will give us speed. Find the easy solutions to quickly make it much more rapid and predictable. And not to focus on organizational or kind of major legislative reforms, because we know from the past that those will take a whole governmental period, or that's even not enough. So we don't want to swamp ourselves into those mega projects, but instead try to find the quick fixes that will kind of leverage a lot of change. There's no additional budget needed. I'm not. It's a bit radical to say, but I don't actually believe in that we should throw in more money into the permitting system, because if we don't get more projects, we're actually just justifying the current situation of long permitting times. So I'm not saying we should invest less, but there's also a problem. We don't have the experts. So everybody's crying, we need to invest more money into getting more experts, but where are we taking them from? We're taking them from another part in the system, which will slow down. So we need to do some structural things. We believe that this can actually be put in place from the start of January 2024. So the next government can do this immediately when they start into office. And the current sitting government can still do some things. There are proposals that are in the parliament still, so there's a couple of fixes that can be done even this fall. And then to the game changer. One thing which has not been discussed in Finland before our working group has put a spotlight on it is that we have a potential in the existing industrial parks. We have a number of industrial parks that have in, say, Rotterdam and other places in Europe become a huge hub for growth. And we could utilize this existing resource ourselves, but it needs a couple of fixes, and I will get back to that. So basically, the existing strength of industrial parks in Finland is that we have a long-term documented environmental performance. We know what the risks are in terms of environment. There is less social conflict. New investments, we see this in practice when we do permitting, when we establish new operations into the established industrial parks. There is not much social conflict because the surroundings are used to that location being reserved for industrial purposes. And then we have a centralized water treatment. So a lot of the new investments can actually be licensed not to basically need to assess the water impact, not to create new waste areas, which are typically the ones that are kind of environmentally quite critical. So there is potential for perhaps doing it a bit lighter without compromising the environment. To the opportunities. I think even more spotlight has been now put on the opportunities when we see that actually a lot of the competitiveness of the German chemical industry has been built on an artificially too low gas price. And what could we do if we could actually provide the green hydrocarbons to our industrial parks, provide and add cheap energy into that? So we have a unleashed potential here to compete for sizable billion euro sized investments to Finland, several of them. We can onshore new industrial activity to Finland that has not been here before. We can improve security of supply. There's much more thinking about not any longer sort of just as a rule of nature kind of outsourcing everything to China or other growing economies, but instead thinking much more about supply chains, the logistics, and actually having a lot of new production in Europe. And then when when we combine a lot of different type of industrial activities into one and the same area without having logistic cost, we can create new circular economy opportunities and synergies. So what is the waste of one can actually be the material and resource for the other one. What we need, I mean, the toolkit. I'm a firm believer that the industry in Finland on a voluntary basis needs to drive voluntary ecological compensation. It will take too long for the government to fix this, and the industry has a lot to gain also in terms of corporate responsibility. And this is something that you can on a voluntary basis can put into the toolbox and can kind of add to the equation in order to prove that this is environmentally sustainable. This is not compromising the environment. We need an excess of renewable energy, and we need green hydrogen supply. And what we ask from the government is regulatory support with three things. From practice, I see that we need lighter requirements for new production and for capacity increases. We see like the battery chain, the investments. It's not just the battery factory, but you need the surrounding chemical industry to also increase their capacity in order to provide the raw materials. But if that takes like a 3-year permitting period with environmental impact assessments and environmental permits, it's just too slow, and we will lose that growth. And then we need to adjust the system so that we will look at the parks at the park level. So if we have, for instance, pulp mills being or paper machines being closed down, we shouldn't kind of automatically kind of take that away from the industrial park, but that we can bring something in instead, and looking at the park's emissions and keeping that status quo. And then a third element is that we would need to allow the industrial parks also to grow in terms of their capabilities, so that they could actually in advance permit certain operations and then just sort of bring those investors from the abroad saying that we have this all packaged out for you, just come. So this is what we see as a game changer, and this has huge potential for Finland. It only needs a couple of quick fixes into the permit legislation, and I can write those in a couple of days. And then we were looking at different type of bottlenecks in the system. We identified 13 different things that should be changed. You can read those in more detail at the Amcham webpage. But basically, one of the challenges is that we have the court system has started cancelling our permits. So we need to fix that. We need to facilitate the industrial parks, as I told you. We also, it's an endless discussion to talk about whether we should limit the right to appeal. Much more important is to see whether we can actually provide so-called enforcement rights. So even there is an appeal, you can start preparing your operation. And this is not coherently applied across the board. We have the Nature Conservation Act in the Parliament, doesn't contain this. If we fix this, it gives us 2 years, saves us of a project time. And the fourth thing is that the land use planning system and the permitting system is not aligned, and there we can also save 2 years of project time. And then a last point, I told you that we need the energy for the industrial parks to be green and to be competitive. So how do we speed up wind power investments? 5 points. In the 60s, we established an exclusive economic zone outside the borders of Finland. This legislation did not take into account a competitive offshore wind power sort of establishment race, and so this creates a lot of uncertainty among foreign investors. We need to fix this quickly, We need to get more reliable rules on how the game works. We need to secure green hydrogen production with lighter permit requirements. It shouldn't take years to convert from fossil to green. And then a number of more technical things on the permitting side. So basically, I think this is one of the answers which I believe in D. If we can pull this off, I think this will help us kind of save the Finnish economy. Thank you.
I think one of the things that strikes me about the work that you and the red tape and permitting working group at Amcham have done is how incredibly concrete and operational and, you know, kind of take it and just slot it into the plans these recommendations are. And thank you for the work you've done. Does anyone have questions for Kasper on this? Oh, Ville's got a question right over there.
Thanks, Alexandra. So I'm Ville Sipiläinen, I'm the head of external affairs for GSK, a British pharma company, and also in the board of Amcham. So you mentioned the compensation as a part of your presentation. So our company, as many other companies, are striving to get to zero environmental impact, and many countries do as well. But there is some emissions that you just cannot get rid of, and those are usually covered in environmental plans with the compensation. But there's not that many options for actual ecological compensation at the moment. So where do we find those options that we can compensate our remaining footprint?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. I think we don't have a legislation in place for this, but I basically believe that if companies would start to do voluntary compensations, for instance, for the impact on water bodies, which is pretty important and a huge permitting risk in terms of the long-term impact, because the industrial operations are just a small contributor to the water body sort of negative impacts. We have things like former peat production, forestry, agriculture that are kind of quite big contributors. So if we could create arrangements where we mitigate those impacts with contracts and put that into the permits as a condition that you need to do this compensation in order to keep your permit in force, then we just need the Supreme Administrative Court to approve that in the first case, and we don't even need to change the legislation. But I'm not talking of basically about CO2 compensation, but I'm talking more about biodiversity compensation and in particular water impact compensation. So, and this could be done on an industrial park level. So the park could basically take care of this, and then it would be easier to do sort of larger investments. But I think, of course, some piece of legislation would, of course, create an industry around the compensation. Now you need to do more kind of bilateral things. So.
Excellent. We have time for one more question. Antti had a question right over here.
Thank you. So Antti Aumo from Invest in Finland, Business Finland. Kasper, thank you for a very inspiring presentation. I believe in your vision, and if we put our mind to it and see the urgency, I think it is possible. But I'm very concerned that there are very smart people in Finland who can find very smart explanations why it's not possible. Your comment, please.
Yeah, I think the reason which I believe why this is kind of these ideas are generated in a forum like Amcham is that in fact within the government things are quite siloed. So we have experts which are looking at one area of permitting, others that are looking at zoning and so forth. But there's very few people within the government who has a holistic perspective on how does this kind of play together when you're doing an industrial project. So it's more on the private sector that you get this experience when you actually need to kind of do the timeline. And this has sort of basically grown out of the practical experiences of looking at different large projects which basically involve the whole range of all types of permits which are needed, which are necessarily not from the one and the same authority, but from different types. So
I was going to say, I feel like that's another call to have more engagement between all of those smart people, between the public and private sector, to have those discussions to show why in practice there needs to be more will to get this done. I'm going to walk on the wild side because I saw one more hand go up. This will be the last question for Kasper, and we'll take a quick and snappy answer.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Pauliina Saari from Gaia Consulting. Thank you so much for the really practical suggestions, and we are really happy to see this kind of, or hoping that these suggestions concerning industrial parks would really fly, because we have actually supported previously few industrial parks to apply for an environmental permit, and we have really good experience from that, and that would really help. I have one comment concerning the compensation. I think the question was especially concerning greenhouse gas emissions, and that's one thing that we really need clear regulation and more rules for that, and that's something that the Minister of Environment is working on. So there will be more guidance on how to do voluntary compensation concerning carbon emissions. But as Kasper, you said, it's even a wider issue concerning biodiversity and water issues. So we need even more. We have just in the beginning concerning the carbon emissions. But my actual question was concerning the industrial parks. You mentioned there that there would be a benchmarking of emissions on park level. Could you elaborate on that just a bit? I might have missed something from your presentation. Could you clear that up?
Yes, basically what I'm pointing at is that there is a risk that if an existing long-term operation shuts down and there's a new entrant into the area, the level of emissions that are allowed are being reassessed, and perhaps not put at the same level which was with the previous operator. So I would call for an assessment on a park level in order to be able to maintain the volume of the industrial activities at the park level. Of course, continuously trying to improve, but at the same time not hampering the possibility of keeping these areas vital and also allowing growth. So even with the promise that if we can maintain with these levels, we can compensate, but that we can actually add in new players into the parks so that they become more vibrant.
Fantastic.
And one last comment. Yeah. I mean, it was asked. Antti doubted how will this be done. I think it's up to the politicians. I mean, it's not. I mean, this would have happened if it would be up to the civil servants, perhaps. But we need political will for somebody to say that we need to do this, and it's just too big thing to fail. So we need to say. So this is basically my address to.
I was going to say, and these recommendations are available in Finnish and in English, both languages, so feel free to share them with your friendly politicians. Election season's coming up, and this is really important for our future. Thank you, Kasper, for the work you've done and your leadership. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to even further engagement, insights, and discussion with our FDI panel. It's a sincere pleasure to welcome our moderator for the panel, Tomi Ere. He is also the chair of Amcham's board. Tomi is the managing partner at August Associates, has worked as a management consultant since 2001 before becoming a partner in 2007. Tomi focuses on client projects relating to strategy, transactions, and organization and leadership that drive sustainable impact. He holds a master's degree from the Helsinki University of Technology, currently Aalto University. And Tomi has served on Amcham's board of directors for several years. He became chair during one of our most trying times during the pandemic. And during these difficult and volatile times, I have to say that his support and his leadership has been a source of inspiration for especially myself, Tomi, but also for the team. So thank you very much, and I warmly invite you to the stage.
Thank you for the kind words, Alexandra. Can you hear me well? The mic is working? Great. So everybody here at the Epicenter and people online, so warmly welcome to this event also from my behalf, and welcome to follow this panel discussion. This FDI topic is very close to my heart because of my role at August and at Amcham. There is a big mission to make Finland as great place as possible to do business. And today we have gathered a very impressive group of speakers to share their thoughts about this important topic. So next I will introduce and invite our panelists to join me to the stage one by one. And first welcome Heikki Malinen, President and CEO of Outokumpu. Feel free to select a seat. Briefly, so Outokumpu is the leading producer of sustainable stainless steel globally, and with annual net sales of almost 8 billion euros and operations in 30 countries, Outokumpu is one of Finland's industrial heavyweights. And I assume is constantly considering investments to further increase competitiveness in the global stainless steel market. And next I welcome to the stage Anil Joshi. Hi Anil, Managing Director and Country General Manager, Kyndryl Finland. And Kyndryl is a global technology and consulting leader driving customers' digital transformation agenda. And they are operating in more than 60 countries, serving 75% of Fortune 100 global customers, quite impressive. And in Finland you are providing services to more than 40 Finnish customers in private and public sector. And you have made significant investments in Finland with 3 data centers and first acquisition Samlink. And welcome Dimitri Qvintus. Head of Communications and Public Affairs, just select the seat, Science and Sustainability, Bayer Nordic region. And Bayer is one of the most well-known foreign investors in Finland. Bayer's Finnish investments over the past 10 years total more than 800 million euros, and you employ more than 1,000 people. You were among the biggest taxpayers in 2020, and the first non-Finnish company to receive the Internationalization Award of the President of the Republic in Finland. And next, welcome Elina Kivioja, CEO Vattenfall Finland. Yes. Elina is also the member of Amcham Finland's advisory board. And Vattenfall has electrified industries and households for more than 100 years. And currently, Vattenfall is the 3rd largest electricity seller in Finland, producing water energy in 9 different production facilities. And then welcome Lauri Kajanoja, Director General Economic Policy Coordinator, Ministry of Finance. And Lauri has extensive experience in economic policy from his time at the European Commission, European Central Bank, and serving as advisory to Bank of Finland's board before moving to his current position at the Ministry of Finance. So now we have all the panelists here. So once more, welcome to everybody. And let's get the panel started. So I was thinking that first let's have a warm-up question to everybody. So in maximum 1 minute, please share your top-of-mind thoughts that what is the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of Finland as a business location? And if we start with Lauri.
Thank you. So the biggest strengths and weaknesses of Finland as a business location.
Yes, just the top of mind warm-up thoughts.
Well, the strengths, I think, if you think from the international perspective, that is that we have sort of a stability in politics here and in the economy, probably. And we also have sort of, if you look at everyday life, we have a sort of security here as well. If we look at weaknesses, then, well, we are a remote country from many perspectives, and of course, our language is incomprehensible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, from my business point of view, so I think one of the strengths that we have here in Finland is the strong Nordic cooperation and also the strong transmission network that we have for electricity compared to our neighboring countries. So Fingrid is definitely our strength because we need strong transmission grids for the industry, for the renewable energy that we're going to build, and that's very good base, and we should make sure that we keep on having that. So that's a very good thing. And if you want to say something that we could develop more is, of course, what Kasper was saying, the permit structure and so on. So we could really be the #1 in the world if we really want it. So that's one thing we can work on. Thank you.
So building a bit on what you just said, I think historically energy or low-cost energy has been a major source of competitive advantage. Of course, our very highly skilled workforce is another. Geographic location is something we can't really do much about, but I think we'll be able to compensate through very efficient logistics over the past. And I think maybe a disadvantage is a bit of this parochial attitude. I mean, we're far away, and I think we're sometimes slow to adopt new ideas. I think that is sort of a disadvantage in our society.
Yeah, adding to Heikki, I think I see that it's a biggest technology hub and it's very renowned, and we have the maximum startup ecosystem companies here. The companies are not fearful of trying new things. There is a lot of support system towards trying new technology and allow the failure, and the ecosystem is strong to do that. I think on the areas of improvement is, of course, the permit that has been highlighted earlier, and maybe more drumming about our strengths to the outer world by more diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah, from our business perspective, I would probably say skilled workforce and legislation, which is quite enabling, modern, I'd say. Then Finland is a predictable, stable environment for businesses. And then on the downside, or let's say in a positive way, those that could be even better. So yeah, we're a small nation. We should be more. We're too few, so more skilled people to Finland. Yeah, workforce. And then we're sometimes a little bit slow when it comes to the processes, so there we could improve.
Thank you so much. So I guess now we are all warmed up, so let's continue with another question that is the same for all the panelists. So let's talk about the recent developments. So there have been positive, but also very negative things going on. So on a positive note, there is the new R&D incentive. There is the NATO membership application, and that process is continuing. But there is also the war is continuing as well, and having impact on Europe. There is the energy crisis that we discussed about in the presentations, and there is also a talent shortage facing many companies and industries. So with all these tailwinds and headwinds, how do you see what is the net impact at the moment to Finland's competitiveness? Are we going for better or worse at the moment? So maybe we start there this time.
I'm an eternal optimist. I always want to say that things are going to get better, and if you look at the history, that's a fact. Things always tend to get better. Of course, it requires a lot of active action from the whole society, from businesses, from industries, business life, and then of course from the legislation, from politicians. I do believe that we've got all the tools, if there is will, to make improvements. Then we're going to talk about things like education and skills. We have been really, really good at that. That's definitely a strength in Finland. And maybe I would, in this case, in this situation, when, like Aki said, Aki Kangasharju said that the world is going crazy. So in this kind of situation, uncertainty, difficult times, I would concentrate on the already existing strengths that Finland has. And then you go to basic things like skills, education, investing in people and their skills. So I would give a positive answer, although the situation is awful around us.
How about you, Anil? Are we going for better or worse? What is the trajectory?
Yeah, I think if you see we are now in the fourth industrial revolution, and in the fourth industrial revolution, everyone talks about energy, sustainability, then the advancement of artificial intelligence and blockchain and other things. I think it's a more demanding with the peripheral issues of geopolitical instability and also the pandemic, which is we are now living after the pandemic, the lives have changed. So I think it's become very important for every company to focus upon how to keep their talent motivated and how to attract talent from outside. I was just reading the Technology Finland report, and they have recommended to the government that we would estimated be needing 130,000 experts by 2030. And that's a tall order in terms of looking where we are right now. And to expedite to that, I think they have also given good recommendations, and I concur with that. One is, of course, increasing the STEM higher education places in the universities by 5,400, and also expediting the visa processes from months to weeks. Those are the couple of things that can be looked at to better the situation in this demanding, I would say, fourth generation industrial revolution era.
Thank you.
I got really warmed up from Kasper's presentation, and I would have initially answered your question saying I think we're going worse, but kind of building on what Qvintus was saying here, I mean, we can also look at it very positively. And I have to say that I was lucky to be tipped by somebody that go to Sweden and go to northern Sweden and see what they're doing. So I went there. I've been there now 4 times in the last half year. And I want to tell you a short story because I think it's relevant for the context here when we think about FDI. I mean, Sweden is now 3 steps ahead of us. They have many of the similar issues we have, but they're accelerating. And if you look at the industrial revolution which is happening in central and northern Sweden, it is going to be massive. I mean, the amount of capital which is flowing into that region, and they're just across the border, is really unbelievable. If you look at the hydrogen economy, you will need easily 3 megawatt of electric power to generate hydrogen. So there's no hydrogen economy without electricity. And Finland has about 150,000 megawatts, theoretically, of wind power capacity. We have more land, relatively, we have more free land than any country in the European Union. So if we look at the opportunities, they're in front of us. I mean, we could become the leading renewable energy nation in the European Union. Spain has solar, but they don't have access necessarily, and they have grid problems. So I think we'll have to come back to this energy topic today. I think it is fundamental to when we think about Finland's future.
It's very nice that you said that. I agree totally, of course. Yeah, one of the things that we need to take care of is that we have enough energy, enough renewable energy, enough affordable energy, and enough transmission grid. And what we need to take care of also is that we need to make it as easy as possible to invest. The investments in the energy sector are 10 to 60 years. So the investors are looking how stable the economy is, and Finland is stable. So I think I'm positive as well. But we really have to be concrete and do. And I think one good thing about this crisis is that when it's time of crisis, so things happen faster. And I think that that's the case in renewable energy as well. We have been talking a long time about, we need to build some more renewable energy. We need to do this and we need to be flexible. But it's only now that people really are doing it in time of crisis. And I think that we in Finland still have a chance, but we have to use that chance and do it now.
I think the next few months and next few quarters will be difficult because the international economy, we have so big risks in the international economy, and as we saw in the poll earlier, I think many of us think that there will be a recession. Perhaps the recession will be rather short. Perhaps it won't be that deep. Remains to be seen. But the short-term outlook is not that good, and a big role is of course played by what happens in the EU and in Germany and so on among these energy crises. But if you look sort of beyond the next few quarters, then of course the longer term outlook is much brighter to a large extent due to the visions of the other panelists here, and green energy is important, and hopefully also we'll get measures so that we'll get our Finnish public finances, the outlook of that better. That remains to be seen.
Good, thank you. So I think certain themes are definitely getting attention here. So the energy and green transition. So let's dig into those a little bit more. I have a few specific questions. First to Heikki, it would be really interesting to hear from your perspective, because Outokumpu, as I said, is a kind of example of a Finnish industrial giant. So it makes a big difference how you feel about Finland as an investment location. And you have high ambitions. You want to be the customer's first choice of sustainable stainless steel. And to deliver on this ambition, Outokumpu has made, and I would assume that you will continue to make, several green transition-related investments, whether it's on electrified production, biocoke production, or something else. So my question is that what should be done to further accelerate the green transition-related investments in the industry, and so that these investments would preferably happen here in Finland?
Okay, well, I'll try and answer that a little bit from Outokumpu's perspective. Two just facts about Outokumpu. So first of all, our largest facilities are in Finland, Sweden, Germany, and the United States. In the US, we're the second largest producer of stainless steel. So we're a major player also in the United States. And obviously, we look at all of these four regions when we think about investments globally. So it's sort of a optimization game in some ways. Secondly, in terms of energy, we are the largest industrial energy user in Finland. We use about 4 terawatt hours of electricity here in the Nordics and Germany. So we are a major player in terms of using that. So for us, of course, and in our industry, which is very energy intensive, and this is not only steel, it can be also fertilizer industry, it could be cement industry, many other industries, paper industry, all of them need electricity and power. Cost competitiveness is driven off of the price. It's not only availability, but it's also the cost. And of course, the recent developments are extremely worrying, simply because I think my base scenario is that while we hope that the war in Ukraine will be over soon, I think we've just seen a massive change in fundamentals, and we're going to be living through a longer-term energy sort of, price super cycle. And because these things, like you said, I mean, you don't change them. It takes 30, 40 years to make changes. Something has now broken, and it will take a long time to fix. So I really wanted to say that what Kasper, the initiatives Kasper laid out as one example are extremely important. I would elevate them really to the top of the list. Another point I just wanted to say is we have a tendency, at least in Finland, to cry out to the government that, government helps, pays, we need money. I'm in the business of being a realist. And if we look at Finnish government debt in 2010, I remember it was about 75 billion. And somewhere next year we will be at 154 billion. Roughly right? So our government debt has doubled in a decade. And so there is no, I don't know, there's a limit at some stage where the government will not be helping financially. So I personally think that companies should try, we need foreign investment, we need to do everything we can to get investments in here. And I want to just say that out of my trip to Sweden, I see that the Swedes have now one leg up. And we won them in ice hockey, so why can't we win them in this one?
Great. Then I have a question to Elina. So you're obviously in the exciting industry at the moment, so part of the solution. And how do you see regarding the Vattenfall's role in the renewable energy transition? So what kind of investments are needed in Finland to achieve these ambitious goals set by the current government? And what is needed to encourage investments in Finland? Do we need new regulation, more focus on stability? What is needed to encourage those investments that are bringing the solution?
It's of course all of those, but I'd like to highlight one, and it's scaring a little bit investors that EU is now, there's a discussion in the parliament that we should reform the power market, power production market. And that's worrying investors because investors like to have a stable environment. And in 2019, EU made they made a paper for creating the market, production market. And we should instead consider that we should focus on following those rules and trying to make it work than to try to change the market design now because of the crisis. Because the crisis is not the normal situation, and to make changes while there is crisis is not wise. We should consider that the fundamentals are the most important, because the investors that are investing in wind and solar energy and hydrogen and so on, so they are scared if the market design is going to be changed because they don't know what's happening. So I think we should, Finland should support the EU legislation and support together with the other Scandinavian countries that we follow the regulations and we don't try to change anything right now because it's quite dangerous way. That's why, the investors can change their mind and look away from Finland.
Continuing still a little bit with you, Elina. Heikki said that northern Sweden is doing great things. What have you seen? Do you have views on international benchmarks that what could we learn from other countries in order to improve the situation in Finland regarding the energy and the investments in green transition?
Of course, it's always good to benchmark other countries, what has been good and what bad. I think we could look at the British permit processes for wind, offshore and onshore wind. They have had that for a long time, and we could look at that because in Finland, for example, the legislation and the experience about wind power and onshore and offshore is quite thin for politicians and for officials and everyone. So we should try to learn more from there. And also we could learn, of course, from all the different countries a little bit. But we should not learn from Germany, maybe.
Good, thank you, Elina. Then I have a question to Lauri. So we have talked about this depth and those graphs shown in the keynote presentation were quite scary. From your perspective, how do you see this increasing debt over the last decade has impacted Finland's country brand and our attractiveness as an investment location?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and of course, if you look at Finnish government debt, the level of the Finnish government debt, then it's below the EU average, but it's higher than in other Nordic countries. So we are not at the moment, in terms of the debt level of the debt, in a very good place or a very bad place. But the problem is that what the outlook is, and we have this demographics, rapidly aging population, and therefore it becomes more difficult all the time to sustain this sort of a relatively benign situation when it comes to the debt level. And there, if you look at what the situation is between or relative to other EU countries, you shouldn't be too happy just because Finland's debt level is below the EU average, because basically if other countries have a lot of debt, that's not good for us. I mean, it only makes our situation more difficult if other EU countries get more indebted. But if you think about from the point of view of Finland as an investment place to invest, then so far I think the government still has had room to maneuver when it comes to fiscal policy. We are not constrained in the short term, but then this weakish outlook, is a threat. And if we just continue on this path in a way without any major improvements in public finances, then in say 5 or 10 years, about 10 years, we are already at the same debt level as the UK is, and we've seen in a couple of weeks now the problems in the UK when they decided to in economic policies that would have increased debt a lot, and there was a strong market reaction. But when it comes to the recent crises, then we have not seen a big increase in this risk in market risk when it comes to Finland, as Aki showed in the graphs. There is some increase in, for example, in the government in the interest rate government pays relative to Germany, but that is not; those are not so far not that big.
Okay, good, thanks. I think there was earlier during one of the presentations a brilliant question from Alexandra that so if we could or when we pick up our game and attract much more FDI into Finland, and let's speculate that we can double it. So would you agree on how would you elaborate on the impact? How would it help our overall economic situation if we really can pick up our game on the FDI front?
Well, I think generally when it comes to FDI and its effects on the economy, I think it was already mentioned here earlier that underlined that what is sort of we have this FDI means in a way that the capital moves from one country to another across national borders, but also knowledge and knowledge moves across borders, people move across borders, and so on. Technology moves across borders, so all that is basically positive. And if you decompose economic growth, you can decompose it into labor input, and then or employment, and then into productivity. And I think FDI inflows affect both of those positively. Perhaps one useful point of view is economic history, and if you look at 150 years back, in the 19th century, what happened? Finland sort of industrialized, and a lot of that industrialization was directly due to foreign capital and FDI flows into Finland.
Thanks. Hey, let's then dig deeper into one of the sectors, so healthcare. So I have a question to you, Dimi. So Finland is often seen as a pioneering country in the use of health data and digitalization of healthcare. But however, some businesses feel that we're currently at risk of falling behind of the competition. So what ideas do you have? How could we secure Finland's position to be at the forefront in the health data use and boost our attractiveness towards the international life science companies, especially when we compare ourselves to, for example, the Nordic neighbors?
Yeah, it's true that Finland has been seen as a strong player when it comes to use of health data and the vast opportunities that comes with that. My own company, we do believe that Finland is a good place to operate in and to invest in. We have legislation that has been modern, that has been enabling. Then of course, when you talk about health data, the development is extremely fast. It's so rapid that in that kind of situation, the legislation has to also follow. It has always be kind of up to date, and therefore it is important that there is enough interaction, dialogue between companies and the decision makers, so that we can always be sure that the legislation supports both the people, but then also the usage of health data, developing new ways to help people. So that's one thing. Then of course, always coming back to the same thing with Finland is that we are a small nation, and although we have a huge amount of skills in this country, we're only 5 million people or 5.5 million people, and the amount of people who move to Finland who want to come here, that is too small, who actually also live and work here. So we need to become better in finding people who want to come here, to make it easier to come and move to Finland, and then always keep in mind that that quite often the person who decides to come to Finland does not come alone, but takes along with his or her family. And since, was it you, Heikki, who said that our dear language is almost completely incomprehensible? It was Lauri, yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. So you can learn it. You can learn it. It's always possible, but it's really difficult and it takes time. So that's the reason why we always need to, or we should become better in providing services, not only in Finnish and Swedish, but in English. And that applies not only to the person who actually comes to work here, but to his, her spouse, kids, kindergarten, all kinds of social services, and so on. And then, yes, we do need also more welcoming attitude, in my opinion. Yeah, was it 130,000 people that we need? Yeah, and that might be even an optimistic figure. So I mean, we need to be our hands wide open and welcome people who want to come here. So it's these kind of bricks and aspects that you can build an environment. So more skills, put effort in increasing the skill level in Finland. Education system needs to be always up to date as well. Legislation, and then I forgot to say that processes. When talking about health data, it's really delicate. You always have to consider and take into the consideration the that it's come on. I mean that you can know who you're talking about. Anonymity. So that's one thing. Yeah. So with these kind of things, I would probably start.
Excellent points, Dimi, and I would like to drill down to one of those with you, Anil. So, reflecting back to last year when Amcham published this Finland FDI vision, it was also mentioned there that the diverse talent pool and the predictable talent pipeline is one of the most important investment criteria for high-tech companies. So my question to you, Anil, is that how would you promote Finland to potential high-tech investors and executives, international executives like yourself? So that how could we, what should we do differently to attract more people like you here to Finland?
If I see the unique selling point, and I think it's become more relevant after the pandemic because the talent who is now moving across the borders, salary is not the only one criteria that they have in mind. It's all about healthcare systems, work-life balance, well-being. If the organization is prone towards sustainability, if I can contribute in that sense. So the whole paradigm of the requirement that the talent has been shifted after the pandemic. And I think that's where also it's been underpinned by Statistics Finland, that there are very strong points in terms of considering all the things that are going around the world. Stable government, there is a very independent judicial system, there is a high focus on making sure that there is a good governance. So all these aspects are also important. And I think these unique points have been really working for some initiatives. I think the Helsinki partner drew this 90-day program in which 5,000 applicants applied. More than half extended their stay beyond 90 days. And we had 2 registered company. One is 100 million, and then second one was that just impossible. So it's a great sign that it's working, and this uniqueness is appreciated. But I think there is, when I look at foreign companies, they attribute to about 22% of job market here and about 26% of revenue. They have to also create some good role models in terms of showing that when you come to Finland and to the organization, you have a great career path in terms of all level. So I think what is important is showing the diversity of people across all the levels, not just at the developer or things like that, but at the CXO level also. When that representation is built up, more views come on the table, and there is more inclusive discussion that happens, with which you will not struggle much on attracting talent, because you then automatically tap into those diverse workforce that are working for you and communicate those initiatives very effectively across border.
Thanks, Anil. Great points from all the panelists. Let's move to questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, raise your hand and we will get the mic to you. Who has questions for the panelists? I have plenty here left, but was thinking to give room to you now.
There's a question right over here. Hey, Päivi, it's good to see you.
Päivi Sillanauke, Ambassador for Health and Wellbeing from Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And my duty is to try to support the export of Finnish health tech and life science, but also look investments into Finland. To Dimi, you have seen perhaps around the Nordic countries that there has been investments from Sweden and very much activities from Sweden and Denmark. And they are investing and doing collaboration agreements with UK and also other European countries. So how do you see, we have been had a challenge with our government, previous governments, but also this, and now we are looking forward to the next government to understand actually the power of health sector and the advantages we have here, as we heard that we have been going very advanced and forefront with these health data issues and would have potential with health data. But I'm seeing that there are thinking of that, okay, perhaps we don't take the health team one of the focus areas. And how do you see that we could collaborate to get the awareness and understanding of the possibilities in Finland. And if you compare that to now what is happening in Denmark and Sweden, what would you then say that we should do here in Finland? Thank you.
Thank you, Päivi. Really nice to see you here. Thanks for your question. I think that there has been a lot of improvement in Finland during the last governmental period with Sipilä's government, and then with the current one. I mean, trying to build a vision on the health sector, how to gain more benefit to whole society, and how to gain more investments in this sector. So that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. Yeah, Sweden, Denmark, traditionally being really strong on this sector. That's for sure. I mean, I represent a company that's been in Finland, having the headquarters for a decade. We've been investing, yeah, you said 800 million euros. I'd say, yeah, something like that, hundreds of millions of euros, with approximately 80 million euros per year, including R&D, and trying to employ people over 1,000 in Finland. So I think it comes from these kind of examples, setting example, trying to set that as a company, and then also communicating, interacting with the rest of the society as actively and proactively as possible. So that's the company side. Then of course the decision-making side, where they actually have the power to do legislation, to support with legislation. I always believe that that interaction is two-way street. So I have seen also improvement in that. Also politicians wanting to reach out, actually understanding the importance of the health sector and life science companies, what they can do for Finland, what they actually are already doing for people in Finland. So that's it. I mean, I used to say that one of Finland's key strengths is that we're a country where almost everybody think and feel that we all are each other's stakeholders, and it's this kind of mentality that also works in this case with this sector, and like in the beginning I said, I'm an eternal optimist. I do see a lot of improvement in this, and I believe that we are and can be on a good path. Thanks for your question, Päivi.
I've got to jump in here as well, because Amcham's very supportive of the healthcare growth strategy that was put forward, and we have a significant number of life science companies in the membership. And so much about what we discuss actually also in our digitalization working group is healthcare, and sort of this digital health component tied to that. And of course, we already mentioned the use of health data, but it's something where, and I know Päivi, you've been a big proponent of this, but where the public-private discussion happening on an ongoing basis is so incredibly key to prevent decisions being made that have unintended negative consequences. Because especially in the life science sector, that's what we've seen, is decisions being made with unintended negative consequences. And so a lot of the work that our life science companies aim to do in conversations with you, Päivi, but also with others that are in this room today, are to make sure that the education of what life science needs to invest in R&D is really clear, so that when we make decisions that impact a broad group of companies and a broad group of research, that we're not making decisions that hamper future innovation. So, sorry, had to add that. I was looking at Vila nodding at me. I was like, okay, good. All right, more questions. Who do I go to?
Well, let's go there first. But there were several hands, so let's remember those.
Thank you very much. I'm Ville Kopra, State Secretary from government side. I have a question for Heikki. You visited Sweden several times and you were experiencing the industrial revolution there, and you were proposing that also in Finland we should increase the amount of electricity and wind power. Is it more a challenge for companies and investors, or also somehow challenge for government? How could we do something to make that happen better? Because from my point of view, traditionally we've been thinking that energy investments are for the companies to make, but are there some obstacles that should be removed? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. A very fundamental question in Finland, of course. Historically, the energy equation has been solved by Fortum, to some degree by Vattenfall, and then of course UPM and you know, through the Voima have been active, you know, with the construction of Olkiluoto 3 as an example. It seems to be that most of these wind power investments are happening through private capital. It could be international investors, Finnish investors who are contributing to that. You know, Outokumpu, for example, we are a large electricity consumer. We primarily buy from the grid. You know, it is going to be a fundamental question for a lot of Finnish industrial companies on do they need to start actively, you know, investing in energy production themselves, or will Fortum and Vattenfall and the others make sure that there is sufficient electricity available? So this is sort of a very interesting question. Now, who is going to make the investment? If we have to make the investment, if there's no option, then of course, you know, we will have to do it ourselves. Although historically that has not been our core business to be an electricity provider. So I think it remains to be seen, but I think we don't have a lot of time, and I think a lot of energy-intensive industries in Finland, the CEOs must be thinking about what to do. I want to make one comment here when we still talk about electricity, because it is something that is on the top of my mind. And I'll give you an example. Just recently there was a day when, you know, our factory in Tornio is next to the Swedish border. We're 5 kilometers from the border. So on one day, electricity costs for us, spot price, 250 euros per megawatt. Across the street on Swedish side, it's 20. So within, you know, a stone's throw, we have a delta difference in electricity prices of a factor of 10. And, you know, you then ask why, so why is that? And I think that, you know, within Finland, the question of, you know, how electricity price, how the market operates, how the structure of these price regions is built. We have one price region, Sweden has 4. Our pricing in Finland is linked to southern Sweden, regions 3 and 4, which is linked to the price of Germany. And if we think that Germany will have a sequential long-term electricity price problem, this problem is coming and entering Finland via southern Sweden. So while the consumers of electricity will be paying high prices, the producers will be making a lot of money. And I think this is short-term, we can live with it, but long-term it's an equation that will not help bring energy-intensive industries into this country, unless they then produce the energy themselves and they capture that delta profit. So I think there's a nut for the government to think about how do we solve this problem, because at the moment it's an issue, and unless Germany solves its natural gas problem, which I have to say I'm very skeptical about unless the war in Ukraine stops and all the cheap gas comes from Russia again, we have a fundamental problem in Central Europe, which will be impacting us in Northern Europe, in Finland in particular.
Good. Then we have a question there. You? Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Pass it back to you.
Thanks very much. So thank you for the excellent conversation. My name is Hanna Kivelä and I'm from Fujitsu, the managing director. And Heikki, I would like to continue a bit of dialogue with you and ask a question, because I come from the world of technology, digitalization, and I very much understand the role that energy prices and the complexities play in building the business. At the same time, By research, we know that using data, automation, technology smartly, we can really advance and accelerate growth, profitability, and so forth. Would be very interesting to hear from your point of view. How do you see the role of technology and how that accelerates the sustainable manufacturing, as we used to call it in my context? What is the role of digitalization?
I think on the industrial side, if we leave out sort of robotics as an example, I think AI first of all is starting to come in. I've seen practical examples even in our industry where we can use AI, machine learning, and big data, for example, to dramatically improve the productivity of the manufacturing process, to reduce energy, energy usage or increase energy efficiency. So I think there's a lot of stuff coming here. I've seen companies who provide solutions which can dramatically improve our process. So I think it's definitely an area where we are investing. We spend a fair amount of money a year on digitalization, and I'm not talking about ERP systems. I'm specifically, I guess, addressing what you're saying. So it is an area worth investigating. The progress has been much lower than I thought. I think initially when we made quite large investments, we thought we would see a very quick upswing in productivity. Yes, it has improved, but not, I think maybe we're too optimistic. But still, in the long game, digitalization is extremely fundamental. But we need experts, right? We need to find the right service providers. And then, unfortunately, there's this terrible thing of data integration. And I'm not an IT expert, but our people tell me that to get access to the data, you need to do all kinds of integration things, and that costs money and is time-consuming. But I support your idea.
Thank you. And then.
Hi, my name is Nikunj. I work with Nokia Networks. Thank you for the interesting session. I have two questions here. My first question is for Anil and Dimitri. You guys talked about talent management and skilled professionals. So my question is, what is the biggest roadblock you see in Finland and for Finnish companies to bring talent and to sustain them? Second question is for Elina. I think energy is a hot topic in Finland from the time I have arrived in Finland. My question is, you must be having a lot of challenges to keep the prices under control and to do a lot of production. So out of all your problems or challenges, what is the biggest challenge is in front of you and how do you manage it? And related to this is, what learnings you are bringing in terms of energy production from other countries or any new innovations you are planning to do? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think as mentioned, the biggest challenge is, well, maybe the language issue. We're a remote country. Finland is not that well known. We haven't been able to market ourselves always so good. Our CEO and also the previous CEO have been talking about sauna mentality, which is needed in Finland. And with sauna mentality, I mean that we're a nation that goes to sauna without clothes, with anybody, with any person that we never have met before. But then when it comes to telling what we are good at, then we kind of freeze. We can't do that. So we need more of that in order to make ourselves more known. Then when it comes to the question of what is blocking, I would always ask the company in question. I wouldn't give one general answer, because the companies, they face so different kind of situations. And here the Minister of Labor, this 1.5 years ago, actually invited domestic and foreign companies, and I was also in that discussion, and I like the mentality of the decision makers reaching out to companies, gathering companies around the same table, and asking the companies to tell that what kind of challenges are they facing, and then most importantly, what are the best practices that the companies are using to try to get people to move to Finland. So that's my answer. Therefore, would be that I would ask directly the company in question that what is the biggest block. But as a general answer, yeah, the service in English, how the processes are going, how quickly you can come. If you're a student here, can you stay? Will you get a working place? I think you always should get, and there is a lot of room for improvement. It shouldn't go so that you're not, that when you're in, you're just half in. I think that if you're in, then you should be completely in, and not be forced to think that whether it's okay to stay after studies. So those kind of things I would answer. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, maybe adding to that few points. So one is a thing is, of course, marketing. The initiatives are there. There are a lot of initiatives towards attracting talent. But I think one thing that I feel can be improved is the diversity in the organizations. Because what happens is there are a lot of initiatives, but if you can't communicate outside your world and you're not able to tap through your diverse workforce, it becomes very difficult. And that's what we thought it's working for us, because we have 25 nationalities in our leadership team. And we are just adding more nationalities in the company. And the benefit with that is you can reach out to many countries with this diverse workforce at the same time and give them a very strong examples in your organization, how it's working. And that's what I feel would be one of the things that we can look at across all the companies. I think most international companies are driving it, but there are many companies, if you see, we don't have many CXOs who are coming from outside the country. There are not much of senior vice presidents sitting across talking about. So the talent coming from outside, they want to see the examples that, yes, it works. Though there could be many initiatives, but is there any example that I can see in, like, if I want to grow in that country, that is where I think some of the improvement is required.
Yep. Okay. I hope I remember your question correctly, but the first one was that what is the main worry or problem right now? We are also an electricity sales company, not only production, and of course electricity sales is a tricky business right now. Pricing is very difficult. You have certainly read in the papers all the problems for consumers, different, you buy electricity and then you sell it, and if the price is high, so you cannot sell it low and so on. And so there are a lot of issues with predicting the future as well, how the prices are going to be and so on. So that's a very tricky question. What I would like to, was the other question is what I could bring from other countries to Finland? Well, there are plenty of examples that what we are doing at Vattenfall. Maybe you heard about this, our hybrid project, that we are one of the partners with SSAB, LKAB and Vattenfall to have done the first stainless steel, the steel production without any CO2. So that's a totally new technique, and I hope we get it to Finland. There is a question, is it coming to Finland or is it going to Sweden? And I hope our permit process is easier and we get it to Finland. That would mean like 7% of our CO2 emissions cutting down in Finland. 7% is huge. That's something I would like to bring. Of course, we have innovations, project with airplane fuel being fossil-free. That's a great thing. Then we also have projects with cement, electrificate the whole process. And also we are now planning to make small modular reactors, SMRs, in southern Sweden. So we're starting to build nuclear again in Sweden. That's pretty exciting. Of course, they are not a solutions for like big industries or energy-intensive industries, but they are like maybe for district heating or something. For towns, it's good. There are a lot of different initiatives. I think one of the important ones is that in Britain, we have started building the offshore wind power with the hydrogen storage within the wind power place. So that's very interesting. And then also floating offshore wind. That would be nice to have those in the Baltic Sea. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I think our time is up. Small comment, yes?
I still want to make a remark before we finish.
Yeah. We are about to finish because I think the time is up also for what was scheduled for the virtual, but short remark if you had.
So I wanted to just say about traveling and Finnair and the US. Because we talk about foreign direct investment into Finland, but we haven't talked about exports, because that is also, I would say, the same part of the same equation. I've been trying to travel a lot. I just spent 3 weeks in the US, just came back. The airplanes are full of passengers who are tourists. Where are the business people? We need to get up and go. I mean, the FDIs will not come to Finland. We need to go and get them. The business community, the Finnish business community has to step up, go to Helsinki-Vantaa, and jump on that Finnair flight. I have to say that Topi Manner and the guys are doing at Finnair a great job trying to keep that airline up. We have to have an airline that provides a fundamental infrastructure for this country. If we lose the direct connections, for example, to the US, that is not good. I mean, now flights to Dallas, to LA, Seattle, it's all great. We need to keep up with that, and I wish Topi and the team all the best in trying to provide that fundamental infrastructure for everything we do. I mean, without airplanes and flights, we cannot get FDI by teams. Listen, trust me, it ain't going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good practical tips. So, Alexandra, how does the event continue from here?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tomi, and thank you to the panel. I also want to add, Heikki, that was great. It was a lead into one of my favorite talking points, which is that a third of exports from Finland are thanks to our international investors, our foreign investors into Finland. That's not a small amount. And then so it really is both the exports and the imports. FDI is important for all of that. So a warm thank you to our panelists today. It's really meaningful that you joined us, to all of our speakers, and to our event partners, Kyndryl, Bayer, Borenius, and Vattenfall. We couldn't have done it without you. I also want to give some kudos and a shout out to Rosa Thurman, who's our Director of Foreign Affiliates and Sustainability and has really been an engine behind today in our country managers network. Also, we'll be doing a deeper dive into some fresh research on Finland as a business location. It'll be our third iteration that we're doing in partnership with Business Finland. So stay tuned for Antti Aumo and I to talk more with business leaders on this in January 2023. And in the meantime, yeah, there we go. Stay tuned for some of our upcoming events and discussions. You'll see them on the screen behind me. I also want to give a special shout out to our Thanksgiving celebration. It'll be the first of its kind. We'll be joined by Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto, as well as US Ambassador Douglas Hickey. The event itself is really about supporting also Ronald McDonald House. It's part of our efforts to embrace a spirit of gratitude and also of giving back. So by attending, you are helping Ronald McDonald House and making sure that children have their parents with them during difficult times. So we warmly welcome you there. If you are missing an invitation for any reason, please come speak to Amcham staff members. We all, except for me apparently, have red name tags so you can find us easily. And for those of you joining online today, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to continue the conversation over social media. I know there were many unanswered comments and questions in this room, and I know online as well. So please feel free to continue this conversation over our lunch. And I want to say again, thank you very much. And let's bring some more FDI into Finland. Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you staying for lunch, my colleague Mike Kleisico, right over